Is the smile we all fell in love with hiding something heartbreaking? Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart, is now facing one of the most emotional chapters of her life. From a crumbling marriage and shocking family secrets to personal trauma that's only now coming to light. This isn't just another celebrity story. It's real. It's raw. And for the first time, Julia's pain is no longer silent. What really happened to the woman who once had it all? And why is she finally breaking down after years of strength? Stay with us, because by the end, everything will make sense. A star's silent collapse. For years, Julia Roberts made the world believe in fairy tales. But now, behind the Hollywood smile and red carpet glow, something quietly shattered. The whispers began small. Paparazzi shots of her husband, Danny Moder, laughing with another woman. At first, Julia stayed silent, but then the stories gained weight. Sources close to the actress revealed she was crying constantly, that the woman who once lit up every room had gone quiet, even around her children. The family she built so carefully, brick by brick, seemed to be falling apart. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical, too. Insiders spoke of stress-related health scares, headaches, weight loss, panic attacks. The toll was visible, even in brief public appearances. "She's holding herself together for the kids," one friend shared, "but she's not okay." Julia, always private, kept her struggles out of the spotlight. But for those watching closely, the signs were there. Her smile, the one the world fell in love with, looked more like a mask than ever before. And then came the hardest part, the emotional distance from her children. Once her anchor, her twins Hazel and Phineas, and youngest son Henry began pulling away. Whether it was teenage rebellion or the ripple effects of family tension, Julia felt it deeply. "She's terrified of losing them," a close source said. "They've been her whole world." For someone who gave everything to protect her family, the cracks in her personal life weren't just painful, they were devastating. Transition. And just as she tried to hold on to her present, a shocking twist from her past turned her world upside down, starting with a name she never expected to hear. A name she never knew. Julia Mitchell. It happened on a quiet set of Finding Your Roots. Julia agreed to trace her ancestry, expecting some surprises, but not this one. The results stunned her. Her last name wasn't really Roberts. She wasn't biologically descended from the man she'd always believed to be her great-grandfather. Instead, a DNA match pointed to someone entirely different. A man named Henry Mitchell. The news hit hard, not because of scandal, but because of what it meant for her identity. All her life, she'd carried the Roberts name as part of her brand, her family, her history. But now, even that seemed uncertain. "I'm Julia Mitchell," she said, stunned but composed. "Wow, that's a lot." The story traced back to her great-grandmother, who had a relationship after her husband's death. It wasn't shameful, it was human. But the ripple effect on Julia's sense of self was undeniable. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she listened, took it in, and in true Julia fashion, handled it with grace. She processed it in the moment, and then she smiled, one of the producers recalled. "She's got this quiet strength." But make no mistake, the revelation shook her. In a time where everything felt like it was slipping, even her name no longer felt like solid ground. Transition. And as if the questions about identity weren't enough, long-buried pain from her childhood began to rise again. Pain rooted in the man who once made home feel like a war zone. The stepdad who broke her spirit. Long before Julia Roberts was America's sweetheart, She was just a little girl growing up in Smyrna, Georgia, trying to survive the chaos inside her own home. Her mother, Betty Lou, remarried a man named Michael Moats. From the outside, he looked like a decent stepfather. But inside the house, Julia lived in fear. He was cold, controlling, and cruel. According to Julia's older brother, Eric Roberts, Moats was a creepy, violent guy. Julia rarely talks about those years, but those who know her say that silence speaks volumes. Her mother eventually admitted, "Marrying him was the biggest mistake of my life." Julia would retreat to her imagination, to books, to movies, anything that could pull her away from the tension at home. And even after she became a household name, the scars never really faded. She grew up in a house where love had limits, and safety had to be earned. "People think fame fixes everything," she once said, "but some things stay with you." And it did stay with her. That early trauma shaped how she approached relationships, trust, even motherhood. It also gave her a deep sense of empathy, a fire to protect others, because she knew what it felt like to be unprotected. Transition. But there was one person who gave her light during that dark time. A man she lost far too soon, but never forgot, the father. She lost too soon. Before the spotlight, before the big screen, there was Walter Grady Roberts, Julia's father. He was a gentle, creative soul, a playwright, an actor, a man who believed in kindness, not cruelty. Julia adored him. He was her first inspiration, her first safe place. But that light didn't last. Walter died of throat cancer when Julia was just 10 years old. And with him, something inside her dimmed. "I lost him before I really got to know him," she once reflected. "But I carry him with me." The loss left a hole no success could ever fill. Even at the height of her career, Julia often said she'd trade the fame for one more conversation with her dad. Few people know the poetic link between her life and history. When Julia was born, her family couldn't afford the hospital bill. It was paid by the King family. Yes, that King family. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King stepped in quietly, without fanfare. Julia's parents had once run a small theater school in Atlanta. The Kings appreciated their kindness and repaid it in a moment of need. "It's something I've never forgotten," Julia said. "That generosity, that kind of love. You don't forget it." Her father's death and that moment of unexpected support shaped how she sees the world to this day. Transition. But the world didn't always treat her with kindness. In fact, before it celebrated her smile, it mocked it. The smile they mocked. Before her smile became iconic. Before it graced movie posters and magazine covers, it was a source of pain. Julia Roberts' wide, toothy grin wasn't always seen as beautiful. In school, classmates called her names, said it was too much, laughed at her for being different. She learned early on that being unique didn't always mean being accepted. "They made fun of my mouth all the time," she admitted years later. "I hated my smile back then." But instead of shrinking, Julia did something extraordinary. She leaned into what made her different. Her smile became her signature, proof that the very things people tease you for can become your strength. And later in life, she became an outspoken advocate against bullying. She stood up for the kids who were mocked like she once was. "It's the thing I got teased for that helped me become who I am," she said. That smile, once mocked, is now one of the most recognized in the world. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Transition. And with that unshakable authenticity, Julia began her rise. Not as an overnight sensation, but as a young woman chasing dreams from a small town to a very big screen. From small town to spotlight, Julia Roberts wasn't born on a red carpet. She was born in Smyrna, Georgia, a place better known for its quiet streets than Hollywood dreams. And at 18, with no plan except hope, she packed her bags and left for New York City. It wasn't glamorous. She slept on friends' couches, took odd jobs, signed with a modeling agency not because she dreamed of catwalks, but because she needed the exposure. She struggled, quietly, but with fire in her gut. Her early acting gigs were blink-and-you-miss-it roles, commercials, background parts. But Julia was patient. She wasn't looking for instant fame. She was looking for a chance. Then came Mystic Pizza, a small film with a modest budget, but Julia's performance was electric. She played Daisy like she was her, bold, vulnerable, unforgettable. Suddenly, people started to notice. It was legendary critic Roger Ebert who saw the spark first. "She makes you care about her," he wrote. "She has a way of drawing you in." And that was it. The beginning. Not an explosion, but a spark. The kind that spreads slow and steady until it lights up the world. Julia's rise wasn't an accident. It was earned. She didn't come from fame. She wasn't handed anything. What she had was something stronger than luck. Persistence. Transition. And just as her star began to rise, the role that would change her life forever came knocking, wrapped in diamonds, draped in red, and destined to make history. Becoming America's sweetheart. In 1990, Julia Roberts walked into a role that would change the trajectory of her life. Pretty Woman. It wasn't supposed to be a romantic fairy tale. The original script was dark, gritty, a drama about addiction and exploitation. But something shifted. Producers saw Julia on screen and decided this wasn't a tragedy. This was magic. With Richard Gere by her side, Julia brought warmth and spark to Vivian. Ward, a character who could have been cliché, but instead became iconic. Their chemistry was lightning in a bottle. She auditioned twice, and director Gary Marshall fought to keep her. He saw something in her that no one else had before. Vulnerability, wrapped in joy. Then there was that famous moment, the necklace box snap. It wasn't in the script. Richard improvised, Julia laughed, and history was made. That single scene became a symbol of the film's heart, and hers. Pretty Woman turned Julia into America's sweetheart overnight. She was on every cover, every red carpet. But the love wasn't just for her looks. It was for her soul. Her ability to laugh with her whole face, cry without ego, and connect without trying. The world fell in love. But fame, as always, came with a cost. Transition. Because behind the success, Julia's personal life was spiraling, and her first public scandal would show that fairy tales don't always follow the script. When success meets scandal. It was the early 90s, and Julia Roberts was everywhere. But just as her fame peaked, her love life caught fire, and not in the way anyone expected. She was engaged to actor Kiefer Sutherland. The wedding was planned, invitations sent. But just days before they were set to walk down the aisle, Julia called it off. No explanation, no press conference, just gone. Then came the bombshell. Julia had flown to Ireland with Kiefer's best friend, Jason Patrick. The media exploded. The same tabloids that once praised her as adorable now called her a runaway bride. It was brutal. But Julia didn't say a word. She let the world talk while she disappeared. Shortly after, she returned with another shocker. A wedding to musician Lyle Lovett. No paparazzi. No public buildup. Just a surprise ceremony that left everyone speechless. It didn't last. The marriage ended quietly just 2 years later. But the heartbreak wasn't in the drama. It was in the silence. Julia had always kept her heart guarded, and these public relationships only made the walls higher. "Sometimes I feel like I live two lives," she once said. "One everyone sees, and one only I know." The world was obsessed with her love life, but they never stopped to ask, was she okay? Transition, and years later, she'd fall in love again. But that too would come with complications, controversy, and headlines she never wanted to see. The Daniel Moder controversy. When Julia met cinematographer Daniel Moder on the set of The Mexican, it wasn't just another film project. It was the beginning of a complicated love story, one that would ignite a firestorm. The problem? Danny was married. Julia fell hard. And so did he. But his divorce didn't come easy. His wife, at the time, Vera Steinberg, wasn't letting go quietly. And as the tension dragged on, Julia made a move that would define the tabloid narrative. She was photographed wearing a homemade t-shirt that read, "Aloe Vera," a jab, a taunt, and it set the press ablaze. Critics slammed her, said she was insensitive, that the America's Sweetheart label no longer fit. Julia said nothing. Then, in a move as sudden as it was quiet, she and Danny married on July 4th, 2002. A ranch wedding. Small, private. No cameras, just vows. The storm didn't stop, but they weathered it. For 2 decades, Julia and Danny stayed together, raising 3 children, keeping their life as off-grid as possible. But it was never easy. Insiders say it's been a love tested by distance, by fame, by the ghosts of their past choices. "He's her anchor," one friend said. But even anchors drift. And now, with rumors of tension and distance growing again, that love might be facing its final test. Transition. But long before any of the controversies or heartbreaks, Julia had already proved something to herself and to the world, that she wasn't just a pretty face. She was a powerhouse, her role of a lifetime, Erin Brockovich. By the year 2000, Julia Roberts was already a box office darling, a megastar, the face of romantic comedies and red carpet dreams. But Erin Brockovich changed everything. It didn't just cement her as a star, it made her a force. Gone were the flowing gowns, the perfect hair, the glossy lighting. In this role, Julia stripped it all away. She stepped into the skin of a real woman, a broke, twice-divorced mother of 3, who had nothing but fight left in her. Erin Brockovich was messy, mouthy, and relentless, and Julia made her unforgettable. She didn't play the part. She lived it. "I didn't want to make her likable," Julia once said. "I wanted to make her real." With no makeup and tight clothes that screamed working-class toughness, she gave a performance that silenced every critic who had ever labeled her a pretty face. The grit, the vulnerability, the raw emotion, Julia showed up in every frame, bleeding truth through the screen. The story itself was incredible. A legal assistant who uncovered one of the most devastating environmental scandals in U.S. history. a billion-dollar company poisoning a small town's water supply, and one woman refusing to back down. And with Julia in the role, the story wasn't just told, it was felt. When Oscar night came, the world already knew. The award was hers. And when her name was called, Julia didn't walk. She glowed. Her speech was long, chaotic, joyful. She laughed. She joked. She reveled in the moment. But in the thrill of victory, she forgot something. Or rather, someone. She didn't thank the real Erin Brockovich. For a moment, it stung. The woman whose life had inspired it all had been left out of the biggest moment of the night. But Julia didn't hide. She reached out. She apologized. Tearfully, humbly. No PR spin. Just honesty. "I was so caught up," she said later. "I was overwhelmed, but I never forgot her." And Erin, gracious and grounded, understood. "Julia made me proud," she said. "She made me feel seen." That simple statement became one of the most powerful validations in Julia's career. This wasn't just a role, it was a turning point. A message to an industry that so often boxes women into cliches. Julia shattered the box. She became the first actress ever to earn $20 million for a single film. And not for being a love interest, but for being loud, flawed, and unapologetically real. Erin Brockovich proved that women could lead films, that heart, grit, and truth could sell tickets, and that Julia Roberts wasn't just a movie star. She was a movement. She didn't need a tiara. She needed a voice, and in that role, she found it. Transition. But while the world was clapping, while the spotlight beamed down, another story was unfolding behind the scenes, a story of conflict, isolation, and a betrayal from Hollywood's inner circle that Julia never saw coming. Hollywood's dark side. Hook and Tinker Hell. By the early 90s, Julia Roberts was Hollywood royalty. But even queens have their breaking points. And one of hers came in the most unexpected place. Neverland. She was cast as Tinker Bell in Steven Spielberg's Hook. It should have been a dream, working with an icon, playing an iconic character. But what happened on set became one of the darkest periods in her career. At the time, Julia was reeling from personal trauma. Her engagement to Kiefer Sutherland had just imploded. The press was circling. And instead of finding comfort in her work, she found chaos. She clashed with Spielberg. She clashed with the crew. Long hours, endless delays, and emotional breakdowns created an unbearable tension. People on set started calling her Tinker Hell. The nickname stuck. Spielberg later said, "It was an unfortunate time for us to work together." They never collaborated again. But what the world didn't know was that Julia was grieving. Not just a relationship, but a sense of control. Her life was spiraling, and this role became the lightning rod for all of it. Still, she finished the film. She smiled on press tours. She played the part, but behind her eyes, something had shifted. A woman once praised for her warmth now found herself battling a colder reality. That Hollywood doesn't pause for your pain. Transition. So she started looking for peace outside the industry. And halfway around the world, she found something she never expected. Faith. Embracing faith and a new path. In 2010, while filming Eat, Pray, Love, Julia Roberts found herself in India. And something changed. Amid temples, chants, and quiet spiritual teachers, she felt something open inside her. A new kind of stillness. A connection to something larger than herself. That's where she discovered the teachings of Neem Karoli Baba, a revered Hindu saint. His photos were everywhere. His energy, she said, was undeniable. By the time the film wrapped, Julia had converted to Hinduism, not for headlines, not for press, but because she felt it deep in her bones. "I'm definitely a practicing Hindu," she shared in an interview. "It's something that gives me peace." She began attending temples with her children, chanting mantras, quietly building a life of spiritual discipline far removed from Hollywood parties or paparazzi. She even named her production company Red Om Films, a play on her name and the sacred sound Om. This wasn't about reinvention. It was about rediscovery. In a world that wanted her to be constantly on, Julia finally found somewhere she could simply be. Transition. But while she was finding her center, her home life was shifting again, especially the role that had always mattered most to her: being a mother. The children who grew up too fast. For Julia Roberts, motherhood was everything. She often said that. Becoming a mom was the role she was born to play. Hazel, Phineas, and Henry, their names brought her more joy than any award ever could. She left film sets early, turned down major roles, all to protect their childhood. "I don't want them growing up in a circus," she once said. But even the strongest mother-child bond can be tested. As the kids grew into teenagers, things shifted. Rumors swirled of tension, especially with the twins. Stories of distance, emotional gaps that weren't always easy to bridge. Friends said Julia tried her best to hold on, to be present, to listen. But fame has a way of reaching into the quietest corners of your life, and sometimes even love can't block out the noise. "Being a mother is the center of my universe," she told an interviewer. "But when your universe feels like it's drifting apart, where do you go?" Some say the family was just going through a normal phase. Others believe the cracks are deeper, rooted in years of emotional strain, public scrutiny, and private heartbreak. One thing is certain: Julia has always protected her children fiercely. But now, more than ever, she's learning that some battles must be fought not with control, but with compassion. Transition. And while the world sees only her radiant smile, those closest to Julia know the weight she's been carrying, the kind of pain that doesn't make headlines, but leaves lasting marks. Health, heartache, and hidden battles. Lately, those who've seen Julia Roberts behind closed doors say one thing over and over: she's tired, not just physically, but emotionally. Worn down by years of public scrutiny, private grief, and the exhausting effort of trying to hold it all together. Friends reveal that Julia cries often now, not always for one reason, but because it's all become too much. The rumors, the distance in her marriage, the strain with her children, and the past. Her stepfather's abuse, the father she lost too soon, the career that took as much as it gave. It all adds up. At 56, the signs are starting to show. Not in her face, but in her eyes. The sparkle still flashes, the smile still stuns. But there's something else now, an ache that wasn't there before. She's dealing with emotional burnout, one source said. It's like the years of holding everything in are finally catching up. But she won't say it out loud. She never does, because that's not who she is. Julia's always believed in staying graceful, even in pain. But behind the grace is a woman who has weathered more than the world ever saw. Transition. And now, as the rumors swirl and the truths emerge, Julia is finally confirming what we feared, and what we always admired her for: surviving it all, even when it hurt. What Julia finally confirms: she's not perfect. She never wanted to be. Julia Roberts has lived through betrayal, identity crises, trauma, scandal, and silence. And still, she stands. After all the awards, after all the heartbreak, she finally confirms what we knew all along, that behind the glamour is a human being, one who loved deeply, hurt privately, and endured quietly. That's the thing about love, she said recently. It helps you carry what life can't take away. Julia confirms that fame cannot shield you from pain, that family doesn't always look like the fairy tale, that healing doesn't come with a script. She confirms that strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up, being kind, moving forward, even when the world is watching and you feel like you're falling apart. She confirms that she's still here, still believing, still healing, and that, for anyone who's ever felt like they had to smile through heartbreak, is the most powerful truth of all. Julia Roberts has shown us strength, grace, and now, her pain. Behind the fame is a woman who's endured more than we ever knew. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and thank you for supporting stories that deserve to be told.